This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
The iron door of the Illinois State Penitentiary in Joliet groaned open and spat a haggard-looking man into the world he had left almost a decade earlier. It was the final day of July 1891, a clear sky Friday. High above the man's head, atop the grey limestone walls of the penitentiary 40 miles southwest of Chicago, men in blue coats toting Winchester rifles watched him walk away. If this had been an escape, a single guard could have pumped 16 bullets into his back without reloading. Thomas Neill Cream's hollow cheeks and sharp-edged features were the legacy of years at hard labour and stints in the mind-crushing hell of solitary confinement. He had traded his zebra-striped prison uniform for a new suit, a modest gift, like the $10 in his pocket from the state of Illinois. His few belongings were stuffed into a pillowcase. He was also entitled to a train ticket to his place of conviction, but it's unlikely he had a desire to return to Belvedere, a city in northern Illinois. Staff at the prison, known as Joliet, stopped cropping an inmate's hair in the weeks before release, and the men could grow a moustache or beard, helping them blend in. But the practice had made little difference to Cream, who was almost completely bald. Besides, after marching day after day in lockstep with fellow inmates, pressed together, single file, inching along like a giant striped caterpillar, many walked with a shuffling gait that betrayed them as former inmates. The stripes, noted Joliet's warden Robert McClory, show through his citizen's clothes. Cream had been inside for 9 years and 273 days. Chester Arthur had just become president, replacing the assassinated James Garfield, when he began serving his sentence in November 1881. Grover Cleveland had won and lost the presidency in the meantime, and now Benjamin Harrison occupied the White House. People who peered into the eyepiece of a prototype of Edison's kinetoscope unveiled a few weeks earlier were astounded to see moving images. The telephone, a novelty in the early 1880s, was now installed in almost 250,000 American homes and offices. In Springfield, Massachusetts, brothers Charles and J. Frank Duryea were tinkering with a prototype they called the Motor Wagon, America's first gasoline-powered automobile. Even crime-fighting had changed during Cream's confinement. A few years before his release, an array of odd-looking calipers and measuring sticks had arrived at Joliet. Calibrated in centimetres and millimetres, metric system increments rarely used in the United States, the devices were designed to precisely record the size of specific parts of the body. This pioneering system of identifying criminals bore a name as strange and foreign as the tools it required: Bertinolage. The system was based on 11 measurements, including a person's overall height, the width of the head, the dimensions of the ear, the size of the left foot and the forearm, and the length of the middle and ring fingers. Subjects were also measured in a sitting position and with their arms outstretched. While two men might be found to have the same size foot, the chances of multiple measurements being identical were remote, and the odds of finding two subjects with identical sets of all 11 measurements was estimated at 1 in more than 4 million. To make a misidentification even more unlikely, the subject's face was photographed, and eye colour and any tattoos or scars were recorded. The system renders the identification of felons and chronic lawbreakers an absolute certainty, claimed Joliet's records clerk Sidney Wetmore. Mistake is impossible. Bertinolage was touted as a scientific solution to a challenge that had long faced the police and the courts: how to identify recidivists, ensuring they did not receive the more lenient treatment afforded first-time offenders. Some police forces and prison officials had already begun to photograph those arrested or incarcerated. Police in Birmingham, England, had led the way in the 1850s, marching suspects to a photographic studio to pose for some of the earliest mugshots. The practice was well established at Joliet by the time Cream arrived in 1881, and his photograph was added to the prison's ever-expanding rogues gallery.